Can you tell me where?
Fala pessoal, estamos aqui em mais um vídeo do nosso canal, uma entrevista muito especial hoje, mais uma da nossa série que estamos fazendo, com um guitarrista, multi-instrumentista, produtor, compositor, todas as qualidades e todos os adjetivos que vocês podem imaginar da carreira dele, que é de tudo um pouco, né? Ele tocou em tantas bandas seminais para a história da música e trabalhou com tanta gente importante da história da música. Phil Target Adams or Phil Manzanera, man, thanks so much for your acceptance, for you being able to be here.
That's fine. That's great. I think this is the first Portuguese interview I've done. Maybe I did some when I came with David Gilmour, but I don't remember.
Yeah. Because we had a lot of themes to cover. We're gonna talk a little bit of Roxy music, of course, but particularly about your solo works, 801, Diamond Head, Quiet Sun. We're gonna cover all this. And is to use as a sort of hook to this interview in 2024 you released your amazing autobiography, Revolution to Roxy. It includes, of course, many memories and stories ranging from your childhood in Cuba to your musical work, to the beginning of your musical work in Roxy Music, that you touch upon in interviews over the years. It was somewhat well-known stories from you, but also the book is very interesting, contains a lot of things that many people did not know in depth about your life and stuff like that. And I need to ask, what inspired you to do this autobiography, to write it? Was there a specific moment? How was the specific moment that you had the click in your head to go ahead with the book and make it?
Yes, well, I guess because in 2022, the Roxy celebrated their 50th anniversary, and it was going to be our farewell tour. So I thought, I had started writing the book before because many journalist friends had heard all my stories, and they kept saying, you should do a book, you should do a book. And I wasn't looking forward to it because it's a lot of work. And I'm a musician, not a writer. So I needed to find a way to do it without me having to sit here. I wrote the first chapter maybe 7 years ago, and then it took me so long. I thought I'll never be able to finish a book. So I had to find a way to finish it that didn't involve me sitting here a day for months when I should be doing music. I'm a musician, not a writer.
Yeah.
So I was produced, if you like, by my wife and this other friend who was a writer. And I told them my stories. They wrote it down. Then we looked at it, and then we changed bits that I wanted to do. So I found a method of working that worked for me. Also, it took me some time to work out how to self-publish it. I didn't want to go to a publisher and be told what to write, or you haven't put in something controversial about the members
All
of
these things, yeah.
So I wanted to be free. And that is, part of my philosophy. I've been in an independent, my own label for like 30 years. I like to do everything independently. I haven't been with a major. for all that time. So I wanted to do the book. But really, I have 50 cousins in Colombia.
Wow.
And I wanted them to know where we came from.
Yeah.
So that was one of the main strands that goes through the book, is about my family and my family roots. You know, and like a lot of people in South America, it didn't originate in South America. It originated in Spain in 1492, and then expelled from Spain to Portugal, then to Holland, then to Curaçao, where my grandmother was born and her family came from. And so the book starts in 1492 and it finishes in 2022 at the O2 venue in London.
That's really cool.
And it was sort of pretty neat. And in between, it's a memoir, not an autobiography. So it's just a collection of anecdotes. And it's me also trying to make sense of what happened over the last 50 years in my musical career. You know, how did it start? And just to take stock, sometimes, you know, when you do create new music and stuff, you need a break and to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so I needed to establish why I am a musician. And so in the book deals with all those issues. But, you know, since I finished the book, there's further investigations have gone on. I've discovered further things. So it's me looking at myself and trying to make sense, and also some of the funny things that happened along the road with lots of different artists. You know.
What's the most one of the most remarkable things that you sort of discovered when you're doing the book? Rediscovered, because something that happened to you, but you weren't able to remember, and when you put down to writing and you started remembering the story and thinking, oh, that's a good story, I will put it in the book.
Well, really, the most dramatic one was when I was 40. I discovered that my cousins, my English cousins, weren't my cousins. My uncles weren't my uncles. My father was not who I thought it was. He was in fact illegitimate, and his real father was an Italian musician from Naples.
Oh.
And I did not know that. You know, so that was one of the most shocking things that I found out, but wonderfully shocking, because that makes sense of, you know, my DNA, my musical DNA comes from an oboe player, a Neapolitan oboe player, and I only discovered his name 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool, man.
It's not in the book, but we discovered it in the, you know, they have the census, in the 1900 census, we found his name, and it said oboist, musician. And I didn't know that. So I'm always discovering things. Obviously, you know, the Cuban Revolution, living through that, and also discovering that my father possibly was a spy, MI6 spy. That was something that we discovered when we were researching.
Wow. This is almost like a film story, like a soap opera story of rediscovering your origins. It's something really magically weird sometimes. I would describe that way, because imagine you're living a life and discovering things that you always assumed it was truth, but wasn't true.
No.
It's almost like a falling from a big hill, yeah.
Yes. Well, the other important message to pass on is, if your parents are still alive, ask them questions about their parents, about where that you came from, because I never did, and they died. My father died when I was 15. My mother died in 1990. So I never thought about asking them about, and there were so many secrets that were kept that I had no idea. And most families have secrets that they
Yeah.
don't like to tell, but it's fascinating. And now my grandchildren will know a lot about the history and their history. So it's great to pass that on. So it's a very useful exercise, quite apart from my music. They can listen to my music on Spotify, whatever.
Wow. I found this connection of you with about your early age, nah, in the end of the 50s, early 60s. I, I always found your connection in with Latin America very very particular, very beautiful in a certain way, because your mother's heritage, your childhood in Cuba. You mentioned this in a book, and the book you highlight especially your Spanish guitar of your mom, and
That one
as
there.
oh yeah, you still own it. That's really cool. Uh what are your most fondest memories, musical memories from that time? Because you credit this Spanish guitar owned by your mother as the ticket, let's say that, of your entrance in the music industry, in the music world. What are your fondest memories of discovering music when you were a child, early teens at that time?
Well, as I put in the book, my mother started showing me acompañamiento when I was 7, in Havana, and they were the Cuban song, the kind of music that became popular with Buena Vista Social Club, not salsa and mambo and stuff. Obviously, you need a lot of people, a lot of percussion, but stuff played on a simple guitar and songs. And my mother used to sing all the time, Latin songs that are what they call evergreens all over the world.
Yeah.
Cielito Lindo, for instance, that I know the words to so many Spanish songs because I learned how to play them with her, and she used to sing them. And so my earliest memories were those kind of Cuban music, but also as a child, I was taken to the the clubs, the Tropicana Club, where people like uh, um, Ruben Gonzalez and Celia Cruz, they were just playing in the bands at these clubs, the Tropicana Club and the Sanssouci Club. And as a child, my parents took me along just to sit at the table. I was asleep probably most of the time. And they were partying and everything. And this boy who had his head on the table, probably sleeping. But that kind of music and the dancing all went into me, and so it's all there on my musical palette that I draw from, this wonderful rhythm stuff and the groove of South American music, from cumbia in Barranquilla, and when I lived in Venezuela, joropo,
Yeah.
and all the different kinds of boleros, very much boleros, with my cousins in Colombia, in Bogota. So that whole side of my Latin side of music was there first before I heard Elvis Presley. And then I heard Elvis Presley because there were films of Elvis Presley. And in Caracas, you would see Jailhouse Rock or Blue Hawaii on the big screen with a great loud sound and everything. And so my first, excitement about rock and roll were from these films. And then American college kids would come over to Caracas and they would play in parties. They would play Buddy Holly and Chuck Berry and so, what's this? And then an English boy came from England and showed me how to play some Chuck Berry riffs. And I was like, this is so difficult to play. And And then I listened to the radio to London, and I could hear all this music and what is sort of pop music at the beginning, 1959, 1960s, and then the Shadows, guitar music. And I told my parents, send me to England. I go to boarding school, age 9. They sent me. I arrived in London, age 9, black and white, foggy London. And then
Total different background from Latin American.
tropical and salsa and cumbia and the groove and the percussion to boom, London, very square pop music, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
And but then the Beatles happened, the Stones happened, the Kinks happened, the Who happened,
Yeah.
Cream happened, Jimi
What a
Hendrix,
time to be alive. What a
Pink
time
Floyd, Soft
to see
Machine.
that.
You know, it was like, wow, this is like amazing. And I was so happy to be in London. But I used to go backwards and forwards to Caracas until my father died when I was 1966, when I was 15. And then we moved to London, full stop. My mother came to live in England.
You had a few bands during these years,
Yeah.
during these London years. That's where you met most of the guys in the which later you formed Quiet Sun, Bill McCormick, Charles Hayward. You basically witnessed the Canterbury scene because you met at the time
Yes.
Robert Wyatt too, and he was in the verge of forming Soft Machine. How was the relation? What are your memories knowing them from the first time?
Okay, so
Some of that.
I met two people when I was 16. One was Robert Wyatt, who lived like 10 minutes from our school.
Oh,
Bill McCormick used to stop off at his house on his way home every night and see them rehearsing in his mother's front room, and come back the next day and tell me about one of the coolest bands. And then the other person I met when I was 16 was David Gilmour. So I knew a guy from Soft Machine and a guy from Pink Floyd, and I was so excited because they were the coolest bands in London. And I thought maybe I could be a musician, because I've met these people and they're nice people and they're friendly and they're not like gods, but
yeah.
they were my heroes, you know. And so, you know, we started practicing, and with Bill McCormick and Charles Hayward and then Dave Jarrett, we did a sort of prog rock type band, Quiet Sun, and tried to make it. It didn't get anywhere. And then I joined Roxy, and Bill McCormick joined Robert Wyatt's group, Matching Law.
So just to check it out, Quiet Sun already existed in a proper band in that time in
Yes.
67, 68. It wasn't formed in the beginning of the 70s.
Well, no, it became Quiet Sun at
Oh,
the beginning of the 70s, but at school we had another band called
oh yeah,
same people, sort of same people, but we had a different name.
oh
Pooh and
yeah,
the Ostrich Feather, crazy name.
oh yeah.
And then once we left school, we were age 19, 20. We wanted a cool name, and Ian, Bill's brother, named us Quiet Sun, and he was like the guru. He was like 4 years older. He knew what he was doing, so he named it. And we tried. You know, it was a kind of music that was, I guess you call it sort of prog, but it was jazzy as well. A bit
Yeah,
like Soft Machine. We wanted to be like Soft Machine, basically. They were our
yeah.
heroes, and
You cited that on the book, and that's really cool, you know, because you having the chance of knowing in person Robert Wyatt back then, and he was your hero, your musical hero, being a reference. That's really cool. And I have to something ask about, you said that David Gilmour, and to this day you choose to perform and collaborate together, and you produced two albums for David. One of them for me, I consider his solo masterpiece, which was On an Island. This
Yeah,
album is
fantastic.
absolutely fantastic, and from Castello Horizon to A Pocket Full of Stones is an album. It's an album that sometimes I heard and I almost cry listening some songs. There a really beautiful tune from Gilmour played with Roberto Wyatt, which is instrumental. Then I closed my eyes. I thought, oh, this is near perfection. And and I ask it because it's a 60-year friendship. What do you attribute this enduring partnership with Gilmour? His many people said has that even thought we he had a very stardom thing in Pink Floyd. He sort of maintained a really down to earth, really simple lifestyle, a really simple and really straightforward relation to the other people. What what do you attribute this enduring partnership with Gilmour?
Well, it's really a friendship. You
Yeah.
know, we don't have to do music together. I mean, he lives next door to me, and
Wow.
so we go for dinner. We talk about lots of different things. Him, his wife Polly, Claire, my wife.
Yeah.
We talk about the children, this, nature, all sorts of. It doesn't have to be just music. So I spent like 10 years working on and touring with him, and then that was enough. It was like we're still friends. Next week I'm going with him. He's going to get an award for the music therapy award here, and we're going to be there with supporting him. But it's like supporting a friend. It doesn't have to be doing music, bringing out albums all the time, because he has his own musical journey to go on. And when he needed another ear to listen to his stuff, I was there. But when he doesn't, because he can do it all himself anyway. He doesn't really need to have a producer or anything. He can, but he just needs somebody else to listen and say maybe not or maybe. But yeah, it's friendship. Really, I like him as a guy.
Yeah. He's sort of that guy. He has that really down to earth sense, even in touring itself. Because in solo career, he did not adopt that whole bunch of fireworks, of whole bunch of stage. It's just guys playing on a stage. You in Brazil in Rattle That Lock, it was only you, Kevin McLeod, Stevie Stanislaw, and John Cale, only you guys playing that music. It's
Yeah,
not, you don't need pyrotechnics and you don't need too many other things on stage. It's just music. He's that kind of guy, and
yeah,
I really enjoy that atmosphere on his work.
yeah. Also, I love his voice. It's a very unique voice, and obviously, I love his guitar playing. But he has the unique voice. When you hear it, you know it is David Gilmour. And of course, when you hear him singing in Pink Floyd, it's Pink Floyd as well. So, you know, he, it's, yeah, magic, magic.
Yeah. Then comes your Roxy Music story. I found that interesting because uh, when the band was still Roxy, only Roxy back in '97, you you had auditioned for them, and you wasn't selected at the first moment,
Yes.
and you still a few years ago I have watched an interview from you, and uh, you still have back then the ad from Melody Maker, the of the requirement. Oh, this is still have. Oh, that's really cool. This is
Somebody,
memorabilia. You need to launch a museum. Oh, that's really amazing. This is the part of the history.
yeah, That's the answer. I answered that ad in the Melody Maker.
Yeah, yeah, and even thought you didn't pass the first audition, they hired you as a sort of
No,
technician of
they
roadie.
no, it's a they. I just was friends. I used to bump into them at concert, and I just went to. They never hired me. They had no money to hire
Oh
anybody.
yeah.
No, I don't know why I was there. I often ask. I was there at crucial moments for different reasons. Maybe one of their gigs, my friend was doing the lights for them
Oh
or something,
yeah.
and another gig, I went along with the journalist for their audition for the management company, just me and the journalist in a big theatre. It was crazy when David List was
Mhm.
playing, and I say in the book that we sat in this theatre, empty theatre, just me and this journalist Richard Williams, and the Paul Thompson, the drummer, and the guitarist then David List had a fight in front of us
Oh
at the audition for the
goodness.
company, and we were like, "What?"
I'm thinking the thing.
And as the manager, prospective manager, left, and that's Mark Fennick, who now manages Roger Waters, I heard him say, "Get rid of the guitarist," and so I knew I was going to get a phone call.
Oh,
Yeah. So it's a funny things that happen in life.
that's how you enter the band. That's
Yeah.
how you enter a band, kids. Did you already had a feeling deep down that you would be playing with Brian, Andy, Paul, and for many years, because you were forming a band, and you did not have the sense of thought that, oh, this band would last 10 years, or the music of this band will endure to 50 years. uh
No.
you didn't thought these things.
No. I think I was just 21, and you don't really care about that. You just want to
Mhm. Yeah.
be in a band, and you just want to be in a recording studio and record an album. That would be enough, or do one little tour. That would be enough. And just so happened that it got successful quickly and then carried on. But no, I had no idea. But I didn't care. I had no, I was just young. I wanted to experiment with things, and wherever I went, it didn't matter, you know.
Mm.
And I was living at home with my mother, so I had no expense of like an apartment or anything like that. So
Brian himself used to drive the van for the early
yeah,
gigs. Yeah, yeah. That's I always thought I would never in a million years would imagine Brian Ferry driving a van for the early gig.
well, he
The
was only
same.
26 then,
Yeah.
or 25, so people just did whatever. Everything was much smaller then. There was not so many bands in London, not so many venues,
Mhm.
not so many records were sold. It was small. So there was no social media.
Mhm.
If Brian drove a van, nobody, I mean,
Quite
David
more
Gilmour
simple.
drove a van for a fashion company before he joined
Mm.
Floyd.
Yeah.
They're the little jobs that you have to do to earn some money when you're like 20, 21. You to become Now it's even more so for young musicians. To be a musician now, you have to do 5 different jobs in London to have the privilege of being a musician. It's really difficult, and it was not so difficult back then because things were cheaper and whatever. But it's still, you do what you have to do. So all the people in bands are just normal people, and then they become musicians, and then, except for somebody like Jimi Hendrix
Mm.
or Miles Davis, or the people, or the Beatles, who are just like, or the Stones or something, Pete Townsend. I mean, I consider them to be like super duper. But they're just people, sort of normal people. You know, you just do what you have to do, and that's my advice to all young musicians. Just do what you have. But the most important thing is the reason you're doing it, because you love music. Regardless of whether it becomes successful or becomes famous or not, you just got to keep doing it because it's in you. You need to do it, and it's good for you. It's good for your mental health, for your sanity. Music is good for you, health-wise and psychologically, and it helps other people. We know that. That's been scientifically proven. And so it's a good thing to be in, but how to pay the rent is another matter.
Yeah, because art has this power, you know, of emotion, of really raw intensity, of you doing what you wanted to do. And that's real kind of, this is a real feeling, a real flavor. When I heard all the Roxy music albums, all of them, to the first one, to the debut, to Avalon, I heard, I always hear this raw energy on that above all, above all charts or whatever, or pressures from the record companies, oh, which song do you want to release a single, stuff like that, all this kind of boring thing in the industry. You have guys creating a sound, creating an art, because their own art, you know. And the first one, particularly the first album from 1972, it was recorded in 10 or 15 days in the studio, because the whole track list, the whole repertoire was already formed back then.
We were playing that live already, so it's much easier when you have developed the songs over 2 years of playing live. Although I hadn't been involved in that, I only came in very late, about 2 months before recording the album. So, but the rest of them had been, over the year before, had been working away, playing little gigs everywhere and trying to get better as musicians and things like that. So by the time we got into the studio, Pete Sinfield, who was the lyricist for King Crimson, was our producer, and he had made a couple of albums with King Crimson. So he helped us navigate in a studio scenario what to do, and not to be nervous, and to try and perform and get down on tape what the songs were. And there wasn't a lot of technical outboard equipment in those days. It was very simple. You had a compressor, you had a limiter, you had an echo unit, and that's about it. And you had microphones. So it had to come from the playing of people, rather than, and you only had, in effect, you only had 15 tracks, because you couldn't use track 16. In fact, you had 13 tracks. You couldn't really use track 1 or 16 because they were the outer edge of the tape. So you had to do it all like played. There wasn't any room for overdubs, really. So it was a different method of working, but something that had grown up in England from the tradition of Abbey Road and the Beatles, and Olympic studios with the Stones and the Who and people like that. So it's part of the evolution of the recording process in the UK, which was slightly different to America, but it depended on what technology was available. And of course, at Abbey Road, EMI, the company called EMI, Thorn EMI, were an electronics company. So they developed mixing desks, and they developed a few bits about limiters and compressors and things like that. They made those bits of equipment. So those equipment was unique to very few studios.
You're talking about the gear and equipment and something like that. And I would like to talk about your, especially your guitar gear, about especially your iconic Gibson Firebird 7. And that guitar was something that's really one of a kind. It
Yes,
every single guitar player who sees it thought this is Phil Manzanera's guitar.
yes.
And I was talking with uh, with some time ago, a friend of mine actually uh, interviewed Dave Stewart from Eurythmics, and he was asked why I'm talking about years of guitars, and when in the studio he had the replica of Gibson Firebird. He was asked why he picked up that guitar, why he decided to drop it and stuff like that, and he said Phil Manzanera, Roxy music. That guitar was really seductive to eyes and really has a raw sound. It has a texture. And I like to ask you, you use it Les Paul Stratocasters, but it has a distorted melodic cutting tone. What led you to choose it to play? I love this guitar. I had to ask it. I think it's a
Okay,
guitar nerdy question.
it's a guitar nerdy question, but well, again, like a lot of things in my life, it happened completely by accident. I opened the Melody Maker newspaper and it said they had a for sale sign in there as well. They sell, buy and sell instruments. And it said red guitar, red Firebird guitar for sale. And I'd never seen a picture of a Firebird, I had no idea. But I had bought, when I was 10 years old, a red Hofner Galaxy guitar. And so by that stage, I'd been in Roxy for 9 or 10 months, and I was using a white Stratocaster that I bought off Eno, who bought it off his milkman. And so I went to this house in Regent's Park, and I opened the door, and there was a young guy, American guy, age 16, and he just held up the red Firebird. And I said, yes, thank you. I didn't plug it in or anything. And I just, how much? 120
Wow.
pounds. Thank you. Goodbye. And I walked around. I thought, well, this is the, I needed a flash looking guitar. I had no idea what it sounded like. So I walked away with it. And then, of course, when I plugged it in, I realized it was, he had been living in Kalamazoo with his parents and had come over to England. His parents had bought it for him for a high school graduation. And they'd chosen a custom color, red, because you could choose colors of 1950s cars. And he chose the Firebird red color of a Mustang or an Oldsmobile, I can't remember. But he obviously didn't want to play guitar anymore. So he was selling it. And because it's a red guitar, and I had a red guitar when I was 10, I saw it, I thought this would be perfect. And then obviously when I started using it, I realized it loved tape, being recorded through a microphone onto tape. It had special pickups, different pickups to all other Gibson pickups. And that's what makes it unique, that there's no other Gibson guitar that has those pickups on it. Now you can't have a guitar with that metal that's in those pickups is banned, and also the wood that the guitar's made out of is banned. And the funny story is that when we were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I thought, well, I'll loan my guitar to their museum for a bit so they could show it. They have displays of all the bands who win their awards. But it was refused entry into America because the wood was banned and the metal was banned. I said, but it was made in America. Yeah, but now you're not allowed to take it into America. Crazy. But it is a unique guitar. It records beautifully. So I have used it on every single album I've done, as well as the other guitars. But it has a special sound. It cuts through very nicely, and it has a certain space in the frequency range that tape in particular likes.
Yeah. And about atmosphere in these days of Roxy music, I was thinking you had in the studio yourself, Paul Thompson, Andy McKay, and especially Brian Ferry, who has a really strong personality, let's say that. Were you guys all very selective when choosing which songs would make the final cut for each album? How was the process of selecting tracks? It was difficult, or sometimes in the studio there was a space for improvisation or things like that you originally didn't thought in playing in putting itself on the record, but you ended up putting in the record in the final track list. I imagine I ask it because I was thinking many pieces were left out or became outtakes because you guys were so prolific. You guys wrote a lot, and you had the songs written by you in partnership with Ferry. You have partnerships from Brian with Andy McKay, and the list goes on and on. With the Eno days of the band, the early two records, I think it was uh, another thing too, because Eno was prolific, was another prolific one songwriter. So how was do you guys had a hard time in choosing the final songs in the track list of each album?
No, because we weren't prolific.
No, really?
There were no extra tracks, and also we had a great producer, you know,
Chris Thomas.
who had worked with George Martin and the Beatles, and who we respected a lot. And he controlled everybody. And there are no extra tracks for outtakes, no tracks that anyone hasn't heard, nothing. There might be different takes, and maybe there's a few little things that Eno did on For Your Pleasure, instrumentally things that I heard recently that I never heard before, even at the time. But no, I mean, and also the method of working of Roxy was completely different. We never sat together and wrote a song. And we did all the music first.
Never lyrics first?
No, we did all the music first, except for the first album, which was obviously already developed over a period before we got a recording contract. Every album of the next 7 albums was done in the same way. Put down the music first. Put down all the solos first. Give the track to Brian and say, go away and try and write a top line.
Wow.
And so he had no idea what the song was about. Absolutely no idea. And then you'd wait for Brian to say, okay, I think I've done one. I'll come in and sing it. And you would sort of say, okay, out you go, sing it. So he'd sing it. And we'd either go, hooray, you're a genius. You're going to sing it, or, yeah. So out of the 7 albums, that's maybe 70 tracks. I would say 80% fantastic hit rate. You know, he did. And then 20%, So, but it was a dangerous way of working. But it's the only way we knew how to work. No, actually, nobody ever came with a song, even Brian, saying it goes like this. how many years there were? Never.
Wow.
And sometimes if you have a different method of working, you come up with something different. And so this was different to the way everybody else worked. When Bowie found out how we worked with Eno, he started doing that all the time.
Yeah.
From when Eno started working with Bowie, it was all instrumentals first and then writing top lines on top. So
Oh, that's really unusual. It's really
it's very
something.
unusual, yeah, and no spare track. Okay, on Avalon, I think there is one track with vocals that no one's ever heard. I have that track, but it was done in the same way. But that's the only spare track that's there, exists. There's not going to be a box set with like 10 tracks that weren't.
No, no, not at all. That's
Every,
really boring, some box sets of it. I can't stand listening for 10 alternative takes on the same track. At
yeah,
the
no,
end of the day, it doesn't have much difference sometimes.
it's interesting, to hear the process, like on the Beatles stuff, how they arrived at the very final version. And it's true, all the other versions were not as good as the final version. That's what I learned from listening to all those things. That George Martin got it right. He just distilled it into the essentially brilliant parts of every single person. And Chris Thomas did that approach with us.
Mm.
So maybe I worked at home with my tape recorders, came to the studio with 4 ideas. Okay, I could do this or I could do this. And they said, no, do idea number 3. And that became the one. And then Chris Thomas would help me refine the sound and play it properly and be in time and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, our method of working, and of course, then Eno leaves and I continue working with Eno. And his method of working was very different to the way he had to work within Roxy. He was free
And
of being,
absolutely
yeah,
wacky
yeah,
in a very good sense of word.
yeah,
Uh, that kind of Eno thing. It's Eno working. It's
yeah,
Eno working. Yeah.
yeah, unique.
Do you had you had said that you re-listened to some of the records, listened for the first time for your pleasure by now. Do you listen other records from the Roxy Music days? Because I'm gonna ask you if you had a favorite one from all of them.
Well, I think For Your Pleasure is my favorite one.
Oh,
Yeah,
that second side. I mean, I love the
yeah,
record, but that
the same-
second side, that final part, the boggles man,
yeah, yeah.
and for
Well,
your pleasure.
yeah.
Why that one? Why you picked that one?
Well, also it it reminds me of the last album as a band with the end of phase 1.
Hmm.
Of like trying to get a deal, then playing lots of little gigs, and then finding Chris Thomas as a producer, which For Your Pleasure did. And so um, everything about it, recording at Air Studios, George Martin's studio. Uh, I have a very pleasurable
Hmm.
memory of doing that album. It was very exciting times. And then when we did mainly the next 4 or 5 albums, we were on the run. We had to do tours. We had to deliver the record in time, and then we had to go on tour and come back to finish the record and go out on tour again, promoting the same album, the new album. It was crazy, just crazy times. But yeah, so there's lots of reasons for that for me. Yeah.
Many something that really are amazing things about Roxy Music. To close the Roxy Music part of this interview, we're gonna enter about your work with producing and stuff like that. You're completing 50 years of producing wonderful productions. We're gonna cover that, and many bands. There are many bands. From time to time, there are a wave of new fans knowing the music and coming to listen to those records of 50, 40 years ago. Uh, I need to ask something because here in Brazil, particularly, but I think in the as an international extent, occurred with a film called Velvet Goldmine from Todd Haynes. Do you? Many people see this movie as a sort of Andy McKay participated on that one, and many people see this movie as a sort of of a path of creating a whole new generation of people in the end of the 90s, early 2000s, who got to know Roxy music. And I need to ask, did you participated or overseen some soundtrack or something? Because you played in a whole bunch of things, and I was thinking probably Phil had participated on that one or something.
Well, I know. I think the first track, "Needles in the Camel's Eye," was a track that I wrote with Eno
Hmm.
on his first solo album. It's the first track on taking of "Here Come the Warm Jets," and they used that in that gold. Yeah. So that's the only thing that is they use that track. So it's me playing guitar on that with Eno. "Needles in the Camel's Eye."
Oh yeah, because I love the Tom York interpretation of the songs of that movie with
Yes,
Roxy music. I think it had introduced the band to a whole generation of fans.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we're celebrating 50 years of mainstream from Quiet Sun. I remember quotes from Charles Hayward saying that the sessions were very quick and immediate. You were really you guys had a flow in the studio since the material was basically what you all had circa 71 or 72.
Yeah.
Uh, did you guys change it anything in the album structure or content during production? You change it something, or it was like this way of flow? What memories do you have from the sessions from this record?
Yeah, well,
Mainstream.
the only difference was that Eno added some stuff. Eno was there. He
Oh,
helped put some things on. And Ian MacDonald, which was Bill McCormick's brother, he was there in the studio. But, we are um, making a new Quiet Sun album.
now?
Yeah, now.
Oh, that it's
Yeah,
already finished.
no, it's not
Oh
finished.
no.
It's about halfway through. I have it here. So people are going to be very surprised. It's the longest time between a first album and second album, like 50 years.
Yeah. No
We
one band in the music
can't
history
do
has such
I
a
can't
gap.
do it anymore, but I think people will be surprised. um, it was going to come out this year, but it won't now. It'll come out next year.
Yeah, with
And
the original, except of course Dave, with Charles and Bill.
I, I, there's a lot of the people, but I won't give you any more details for now. But it's
Oh yeah.
coming, and I think it sounds. So some of the material is from back then, 1970,
Oh,
71, written out, which we never recorded. So it'll be interesting and different and weird. Who knows? But we're doing it. That's
when
all I say for now. And more later.
okay, okay, I will keep the secret. I know you that. And as soon as you get the new record, release it. We're gonna do another interview talking specifically about
Yeah,
the new one.
yeah.
Uh, I absolutely love one tune from Quiet Time. I mean, all of them, but particularly Sol Caliente is. is that version from 801 live is also a must too. Do you remember which how this track evolved from?
I honestly can't remember because that was something that we got together, a long time ago in 1968,
Yeah.
69. So it developed. And of course, we didn't record it till 1975. So by then I'd been in Roxy for 4 years, and so we'd all learnt. And Bill McCormick had played with Robert Wyatt on his albums, and Charles Hayward had played on This Heat, and so oh no, I'm not sure if he'd played This Heat then, but maybe. But so we were a lot more experienced and together than that we were when we first existed, in 1970. Yeah, we're much
Oh,
better musicians.
oh yeah. And this year marks the 50th anniversary of Diamond Head too. It was an even experimental atmosphere than Quiet Sun. I myself and many other fans consider it an almost Roxy Music unofficial record without Brian. Were those compositions developed from the ideas that you had for the band,
No,
or they always mean to be a solo material? Because this album, I thought, oh, this is really more similar in style to Roxy Music stuff. And
well, I guess all of us were on it. Eno, Andy Mackay, Paul Thompson, John Wetton, and Bill McCormick. So it was a blend. But I mean, the first track with Robert Wyatt singing, that was something we had
Frontera.
from Quiet Sun days.
Oh, this
Yeah,
is amazing. I love this collaboration.
yes. And
This
so
track's one of my favorites.
it was the ones with Eno, we wrote there then. So it's just whatever happened there. And there's a few instrumental, and one of the instrumentals is a combination of a lot of Quiet Sun themes, and East of Asteroid is just a mixture of Quiet Sun type stuff that wasn't used on the Quiet Sun album. But because we did them both at the same time, on the same days.
I could imagine you changing the musicians all of a sudden. Wait a minute, I was playing
Yeah,
with
12,
Quiet
12,
Sun.
12 to 6 Diamond Head, 6 to 12 Quiet Sun. At Island Studios. In Diamond Head in Studio 1, Quiet Sun in Studio 2.
Oh yeah. And another track that I love this record was Same Time Next Week with Doran Chanta and
Oh,
John Wetton. John Wetton is a guy from he was a guy from another world. You had done a record with him in partnership from
much.
1987.
Yeah, in the 80s, we did an album with the Phil Manzanera album. Yeah. Or was it the 90s? No, I think it was the 80s. I can't remember.
Yeah, no, it was the 80s.
Yeah.
87.
Yeah, we did a whole album together, John and me writing the songs and him singing. No, because he was a very good friend of mine. And he's a fantastic bass player who could actually live sing and play totally in tune, which is very difficult in a rock scenario. Well, his work with King Crimson, he shows you that, with all the noise and the different tunings and different kinds of chords, he could still sing in perfect pitch as well as playing very strong bass. He was a unique, wonderful musician.
Yeah, yeah. And I loved all of these collaborations, especially with Roxy Music in a live setting with other artists too. And uh, talking about 801 now, and I was thinking, I was reading actually a quote from Bill McCormick in an interview. I think it was a very old interview, and he said that X01, in his point of view, was a good excuse for you and him to perform live the material from these records that you released it alongside with Brian Eno, with Lloyd Watson, who used to be that amazing slide guy, and he
Lloyd-
opened some concerts for correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he opened it for
Oh,
some concerts
for
for
when we
Roxy.
played with Bowie at the Rainbow, he was the opening act, and then he opened for some Bowie stuff and for Roxy on the 1973 tour when we toured in Europe. Lloyd came and opened, did his blues thing before we
Mm.
came off. Crazy.
Totally different.
Yeah. But you see, in
And
81, we wanted very good technical people and people who hated technique together. And only for 6 weeks was this band going to exist. And only was it going to play a number of gigs. And then it was going to push, disappear. And we recorded one of the gigs, luckily. And that's why I can hear it now. But it was a surprise to all of us that it actually worked.
it was envisioned since the beginning as a sort of very brief band or
Yes.
something like that.
Concept.
Oh,
Just an idea that would exist for 6 weeks.
oh yeah. How how
Very new idea.
how did Francis Monkman and Simon Phillips had came into the picture? Of course, did you know them? But I didn't know the relation.
Yes, well, Francis had played some gigs and was going to be in Robert Wyatt's group called Matching Mole at one point. So Bill knew Francis. And then I had heard about this young drummer who was 18 years old, Simon Phillips, who
Oh,
was a session player. And so we got him down and he was just incredible. So I said, okay, you're the drummer. And, he had played with his father in a big, his dad had an orchestra, Simon, the Phillips, something Phillips Orchestra. And he played in the pit when he was a little boy with his father. He was just so incredibly good. And after this concert, everybody wanted to play with him. Jeff Beck, Mick Jagger, you name it, Stanley Clarke, everybody who heard or saw the concert, who knew about musicality and drummers, wanted the Who, Pete Townsend, everybody wanted Simon to play with him. He was, and still is, a master drummer. He gives master classes. He has incredible technique. He's like one of the most famous drummers on the sort of
do
in the
you
rock.
foresee do you foresee a reunion with as 801 or a revamped lineup or stuff like that?
No, but I mean, there is a bit of the spirit of 801 in the new Quiet
Oh
album.
yeah,
You will,
definitely.
we'll have this conversation again, and you will ask me that question.
Yeah. This year marks the finally your 50th anniversary, your 50th anniversary of your career as a producer. I found really cool that you debuted in a certain way, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was that producing one of your idols, which was John Cale from the Velvet Underground. And on Fear record, 1974, one of my favorite eras from him. And what led you into the music production? I love how fresh and evergreen, as they said in England, timeless, your production sound. It captures the spirit of that moment, but it has that universal flavor. What was the your first experience with Kale like, and how did you enter this world of production?
He was suggested as being the producer for the second Roxy music album, and because he at the time, obviously we all loved the Velvet Underground, so I knew all about John. And when we went to LA in 1972, he was working for Warner Brothers as a producer, actually. and an artist, and Chris Thomas produced his album. So he said, no, I think the better person for you is Chris Thomas. That's why we ended up with Chris Thomas. So John eventually got signed to Island Records, and the A&R guy was called Richard Williams, and he was the guy who discovered Roxy and who I went to that audition with. So he rang me and said he knew I loved the Velvet Underground. I said, would you like to help produce John's album? So I said, of course. I was only 24. I was slightly scared, but I said, fine. He said, can you get some musicians together? So I chose some musicians who played on Kevin Ayers' albums, because I love Kevin Ayers from the Soft Machine. It's all connected. So I got the bass player and the drummer, and me and John, we went and rehearsed in a little studio in off King's Road. And then we did some recording at a studio called Sound Techniques, which was where Pink Floyd did Arnold Lane and stuff like that. And Richard Thompson did stuff at Airport Convention. And then we did some recording at Olympic Studios. And John had the songs, they were all written. And then halfway through, I was getting a bit bored because John was out partying and wouldn't turn up for ages. So I rang Eno and said, John's not here ever. Do you want to come down and play on his album? We'll tell him about it later. So Eno came down, and then so he ended up on the album. John liked what he did, and so we continued, and we did the album. And then, you know, the engineer was fantastic, John Wood, who had done all those famous records, Pink Floyd and all stuff, and the Fairport Convention, and Nick Drake,
Mm-hmm.
you know, all sorts of great things. So, you know, I just had to say yes or no. Do you want it like this? Yes. If it's like that, then do you want it like that? No. And so it's a series of yes and no's. And then your ears say, oh, does that sound good? It sounds good. That's fine. Or, nah, it doesn't sound good. Okay, let's analyze why it doesn't sound good. What are we trying to do here? So I always try and think conceptually rather than twiddling around with frequencies. I let engineers do that. I say, I know what the desk's meant to do, but I don't want to do it. Say, this is what I want to happen. I'll go make a cup of tea and come back and listen to it again. And hopefully you make it happen. So that's I come from the George Martin school of producers, not the engineer producers. I know what all the gear does, but I don't want to spend all my time checking out frequencies or changing a cable on a microphone. I just think, why are we here? Why are we doing this? What is this song about? What are we trying to achieve? Are we getting there overall? Let's take this a step further about what we're doing. Why are we doing music? You know, why are you doing music? So everybody I work with, that's what I say, and it makes them think. And then most of them know what they want to do, but I can say, well, yeah, that's great, but what about if you could try it like this, see if it works? And if we try it and they say either yes or no, I hate it, I say, right, forget about that, it's a terrible idea. So, you know, it's a series of compromises and yes and no's, you know, and then you hope they trust you.
With this particular process of saying yes and no's, you learned a lot of things during these 5 years, because as we're getting older, we're getting more wiser, as they said, and I imagine that in your case it certainly happened. Uh, what you had learned most across these 5 decades from the artists and from the art of producing artists?
Well, what I've learned is to have a very broad musical palette. I love jazz. I love West African music. I love Brazilian music. I love Argentinian music. I love all different kinds of music. I love classical music. It's all in there. And so it's a blend of what I like to hear. And so when I hear what they're doing, I can help say, have you thought of doing this or that? Maybe bring it in from a different. Have you tried a tongue drum on that? People think, what's a tongue drum? Well, it's a West African made out of wood, blah, blah, blah. Or should we try some strings on that? Or a quartet, or an avant-garde saxophone, or some crazy piano, or something totally unexpected, and try and help from a broad knowledge of music. So it's about loving music and having a broad knowledge of and of all different genres of music. There's very, very few genres where I don't like opera particularly. I can say that. I don't like the words, the libretto side of it. I like the music side on a lot of it. I hate the blah, blah, blah. But I do, I love choral music, but I don't like opera. But apart from that, there is so much music, and I find out the best in each genre. And my world is enriched by music.
Being open-minded. Being open-minded is.
Being open-minded, but just being open to enjoying music for different reasons, in different times of the day, different times of the weather. It's psychological thing.
Yeah. I would like to ask about some of your work with Brazilian artists. And you produced a stunning album in the this one was in the 90s, which was an album with Sérgio Dias from Mutantes and Mato Grosso. How did that project came to be? And I would like to use this as a hook to ask you, how did you came to know Brazilian music in the first place?
Well, I came to know, obviously, living in Cuba and Venezuela and Colombia. It's just part of the South American music. So you'd hear a lot of stuff. And then eventually, my brother was very much into jazz samba and Stan Getz. So he would play he's 8 years older than me. He would play all the time. Or when that all appeared, beginning of the 60s, all that kind of, so jazz samba, and Stan Getz playing also. And then gradually, I would dip in and out, but it wasn't until, I met Sergio when he came to London, and he spoke English perfectly. And then he told me about Os Mutantes, and I listened to that stuff, and then what he was into and what he was doing. And then he was the boyfriend of a Colombian lady singer who was working in my studio. And then one day we said, why don't we do an album? I had a studio, so let's do an album together. And then he has the most fantastic technique and his knowledge. So it was like we had to do an instrumental album. And then we just started and it finished, and that was it. And it was just done. And I had a label by then, although actually we didn't put it out on my label. It was on Black Sun. But so it was part of my adventure. I wanted to work with a Brazilian musician, and then sooner or later Paralamas rang.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was a totally different thing and so much fun, and so I ended up with two, And then once, when Paralamas came to play in Buenos Aires, I played with them, with Fito as well, Fito Paez.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really such good fun. And I just love those guys.
Yeah, they're amazing. And Severino by Paralamas was it was a delicate period for them in Brazil. Their selling were quite fading due
Yeah.
some economical problems. It wasn't related to the acceptance of the band itself. And all of a sudden you release it, amazing piece of art. That's my favorite one from Paralamas. I think that album captures their flavor. You have things about like Vamos Bater Lata, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
one of
Yeah,
is
yeah.
really high energy, you know.
Yeah.
And Ebert is such a wonderful songwriter.
Yeah, he's lovely. And of course, then unfortunately had the accident and everything, which was sad. But we had great fun making the album, and I just loved those guys. And they wanted Brian May, and I got Brian May, and they wanted, you know, the trombone player, and they wanted the poet guy. I've forgotten his name now, black poet guy as well. It's crazy things they wanted. It was great, you know. So I got to meet all these people. I got to have a go on Brian May's guitar. It's great.
Mm-hmm. El Vampiro Bajo el Sol.
Yes.
Really cool. He used that red that green special. We used that nickname, and during the whole Vamos Batelata tour, including the video of the show, it was really special. See Ebert playing with that Brian May
Yes.
guitar. And
Yeah.
you presented a series of 14 or 12-hour, 1 hour radio shows on
Yeah.
Planet Rock called The AZ of Great Guitarists. Did you had the chance of dipping into Brazilian guitarists while researching that?
Um, I didn't, but I am in awe of Brazilian guitarists because of the chords they
Mhm.
play and the way they play them. It's just, I could never, if I practiced every day now for the rest of my life, I could never. But luckily, the Colombian girl who was the girlfriend of Sergio could play that style beautifully.
Mhm.
And I just, it's like that and rumba flamenca. I love that kind. I wish I could play like that, but no, obviously, it's fantastic. The musicianship of Brazilian musicians, and you know, I managed to get um, a Brazilian saxophonist, multi-instrumentalist, to play with David Gilmour on the tour. I filmed him playing in my studio, sent it to David, and he said, book him. Joao Miller from Curitiba is one of the most incredible musicians I've ever met.
Yeah.
It's just, but that's typical of musicians. You know, a lot of musicians from Brazil, they have incredible musical talent. So more, I better not say this, more than any other country in South America, but I think so. Actually, credit where
Yeah.
credit's due. I mean, wow. So
Yeah, they're amazing.
you know,
They're amazing.
that program was really more about British and American
You know? Oh
guitars.
yeah. That's
But
but
actually, yeah,
I heard some of it. It was really cool. It was really cool because some of those guitar players are really overlooked.
yeah, that's true.
Which which ones of your guitar lines are your personal favorites? Talking about guitar, I love "Gun" from John Cale.
Oh, yeah,
That
that's a combination of me and Eno doing the treatment stuff. Um, I like my solos. You mean the one at the end of "In Every Dream, Home a Heartache"? Um, I can't really. There's so many different albums I've done. I can't really remember. Okay, terrible. Really.
Yeah, no worry. We're in the final part of
Yeah.
this interview, and you're a very busy artist. You got and still gets involved in many projects, but I imagine that you would still manages and sometimes, I suppose, find time to listen to music. What are you listening to lately these days? Have you kept up with new artists, especially from Latin America? Were you aware of some of these
Um,
scenes?
well, I am aware, but of course, because I've produced certain Latin American bands like Aterciopelados from Colombia,
Mhm.
Draco, Robbie Rosa, Fito, Paez, Richard Coleman. I've worked with Richard Coleman in Argentina. So there's they tend to be a bit older, I suppose, if you like. So I'm not so aware of the younger artists, but I've obviously kept in touch with all and Enrique Bumbari um, and people that I produced way back in the 90s who are still out there playing big concerts and getting bigger all the time. So I obviously follow them. So I don't really, if somebody recommends somebody, I will listen to it. But yeah, it's a busy day. I have lots of music to do. So at nighttime, I just put on chill out classical music or, some country music, Robert Plant and Alison Krauss, or First Aid Kit from Sweden, something just chill, or some uh, minimalist music, Afro part. Um, but really, I should be practicing. See, I have guitar here staring at me, and another one here staring at me saying practice, because when I do my book talks, I play. And I haven't played for a month now, so I've got to get these fixed. And then, I do some charity gigs. We did the music of Jack Bruce with
Mhm.
the singer from Level 42 on bass, and
Mocking.
Mark King and Gary Husband on drums as a power trio. We did Cream songs. I had to practice a lot to play that. So I do a lot of different things. And we have a new album coming out, me, Andy Mackay, and Paul Thompson, on the 12th of September,
Oh,
called AM/PM Soho Live. And, you
from
know,
the latest 2023, 2024 shows now.
yeah. So that's coming out in Dolby Atmos, in high res. It's got Anna Phoebe, electric violin. It's got a Portuguese girl singer
I love
thing,
this project.
and Paul and a Spanish bass player. And it's an immersive. It's 90% was improvised, but it's not jazz. It's I call it avant rock
Mhm.
because when I answered this ad, it said guitarist wanted for avant rock group.
Yeah,
So gone back to being an avant rock group. Me and Andy and Paul.
no, perfect definition. Do
Yeah.
you foresee doing more shows in the near future with this
Yes.
configuration? I love this. I love
Yes.
this.
It has to be in a sort of screening room or cinema that has 7.1 sound. It's up and down and around, and it's got a whole. We did videos projected onto us of the whole thing. You can see some of it in the footage that we're going to release as well. So, and I'm hoping in 2026. I tried to organize for this year, but it was too late. And so for 2026, we're hoping to do these shows. Um, so watch this space. Yeah.
Was amazing. You talking about cinema. my final question is somewhat related to that
Yeah.
in a very imaginative way. Let's put that. I always ask artists, if you had to define your music in a word, what would it be? But in somewhat later interviews, I kind of revamped that question, and I started asking if these artists could define their music through a film, which one would it be? I would like to ask this to you particular, because as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, back in the rock music days, you in the early days in the band uh, used to be a sort of real cinephile, because you and Brian used to talk about Humphrey Bogart, which inspired
Oh,
to 8B films, and I would like to ask that if you had to define your music as a film, what would it be? So,
yeah, that's very difficult. I think you could have Godfather Part Two,
oh, great choice. Why that one?
because it's got romantic things in it, but it's also got the Cuban Revolution in it, and so it's got things with
Nah.
a lot of beat and drama in it, as well as some scenes of tranquility before the danger.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I just chose out, but I do love film, but if I had more time, I could have thought of other things. But I thought just suddenly thought of that.
You're not a cinephile today.
No, no.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. I will not occupy your time, not take your time anymore.
Okay,
Faster.
that's absolutely fine. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And check out the new album. It'll be on all social, on
And and
Spotify.
we're gonna talk more in the near
Yeah,
future
when the
about,
club comes, you'll be
yeah,
surprised.
about
You'll be surprised. I hope,
no,
please.
no, no. I'm sure. I'm absolutely trust in you blindly. Let's say that. I'm looking forward for, of course, Quiet Sun new album and the 8 p.m. record. Really, as you say in England, bloody happy to talking with you, man. I thank you very much.
Take care. Ciao, ciao.